So how does that work then with the kind of, I want to talk about the sort of Canadian ecosystem of theaters. Plus, you live next door to the United States, so Toronto doesn't really have to deal with Chicago. Well, maybe Mirvish does, but you have to deal with Seattle in a way, do you not? As in terms of other theater spaces? No.
No.
It's just the Canadian
Yeah.
ecosystem.
Yeah.
I mean, do you talk? Are you a member of PAC? Did you
Oh,
like
yeah, of
going to
course.
the PAC members?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and Ashley is fine with, you know, she has a good relationship with Daryl and at Citadel, so they do quite a few co-productions. And, you know, that's fine. I mean, there is obviously many different models of how you put on a play, but that was my particularly kind of sense of the community that I felt needed to be really represented by, and I think the most successful shows always have that rooted in where you live and who you're speaking to, and you know, I mean, and I also tried to build up in the early days, in the first 20 years or so, a team of actors that the audiences, the subscribers would recognize. So they would see a Winston Record in one show and look forward to seeing him in something else, or a Janet Wright, or Nicola Cavendish, or whoever. That, you know, you were making sort of mini stars in the community. I think it's more difficult now because everybody's so spread out, but certainly when we started, that was an intent of mine, to use certain performers that I really valued, and sort of make sure that the audience recognized, you saw this person in that play, now you're seeing them in this play. It's a bit sort of like rep in a way, but kind of idea.
And what other Canadian theaters were you, well, maybe it'll be different in different decades, that you were most cognizant of, you know, here you bring a Tremblay, here you bring a David Fenario. Is that because you're watching Centaur, or you mentioned Maurice Padre? Did you have any theaters across the country that you had a particularly strong relationship to?
I think certainly Tarragon, when you talk about some of the playwrights in the early days of Tarragon, I think I was very conscious of aware of what they were doing. Otherwise, I think it was more, you know, being aware of what's going on elsewhere outside, and helped by Toronto agents who would send me,
Right.
you know, send me stuff. But also, again, being focused on Vancouver, trying to find, you know, the playwrights that I really wanted to support, more than reaching out or beyond. But I mean, I think I was always aware of what was going on, like in Toronto, certainly.
And would you go to Toronto to see shows?
Oh yeah, every year, and be.
And you saw shows I was in, you never hired me? I've been hurt for decades. I'm lucky I'm speaking to you now. I
Yeah,
should be weeping.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's my fault. You see, that's
Okay.
my ignorance, or me saying, "Oh, well, he's a
Or
Toronto
wisdom.
actor.
Could
I'm not
be
going to
your
bring."
wisdom.
Yeah,
I'm not hiring him. Oh boy.
yeah. We go, "Oh, he's a Toronto actor. We'll find somebody in Vancouver to do that part."
And did you have a relationship with Bill Glasgow? Because Bill was bringing in Tremblay. Bill was the first one that said to Tremblay,
Yes.
look, you got to be in English.
I had huge admiration for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though he wasn't really a mentor, but he was in some ways a mentor with the kind of plays he was interested in, I was very much interested in. And Linda Gaborio as a translator, got to know her really well. And so, yeah, it's just keeping, when I was starting out in the 70s, definitely, was very, very, very keen to know what are the trends, what are they going towards, and I also had people, you know, like I mentioned Marcia Sebthorpe, who was from back east, suggesting I look at plays from you know, that I hadn't necessarily been aware of prior to
And
that.
did you ever want to be asked to direct at other theaters? Like, oh, I'm doing my Stratford show this year or whatever. Were you one of those kind of artists?
I mean, maybe subconsciously, but I was always too busy. So, you know, if somebody asked me to recreate something, I probably would have done it, but it wasn't something that I pursued, no. I never had an agent or anything like that. So
You didn't feel left out if you were not asked to direct at Stratford?
No. No.
It's a kind of a calling card for some directors, I find.
Yeah, and I didn't have a particular style either. So it wasn't like, he's well known for doing certain kinds of plays. So I didn't have any kind of particular style. And so I wasn't promoting myself either. I was more interested in building the company and really focused on the company's survival. And once we expanded and once we had, running 2 theaters and then running 3 theaters, kept me pretty busy. So it wasn't as if, I'm very hands-on. So I didn't want to be away, I wouldn't want to be somewhere worrying about what was going on. I was very conscious of being there.
Hands-on for production, hands-on for
Yeah.
building sets and costumes for actors, or
Just basically hands-on with the way the operation.
so Morris is directing a show here and you're dropping in a week too to have a look at a run?
Not unless I was invited, but once they got into the theater, I would give notes.
Right.
And extensive notes, and I would go to every preview, and some directors took the notes, some directors ignored them, but yeah, and I felt one other ability I felt I had was I was able to watch a play, not one I directed obviously, but and point out something that maybe the director hadn't noticed, or I could say, take a look at that actor because I think there's something odd going, because the director has so many different things to look at.
Right.
That I think I was helpful in that way, and also with new work that I could analyze a play. And once we had a literary manager, Rachel Deiter, working with her in developing work and going through the workshop process, and I felt that I had an instinct to say something that I didn't feel worked, but it had to be just me responding.
Right.
That you have to open yourself up and just respond honestly to what you don't understand. Usually it's something I didn't understand.